Thank you very much, everyone, for being here this evening. My name is Josh Matlow. I am our local city councillor here in Toronto, St. Paul's. And I know many of you, and it's good to meet some of you who I haven't yet. The reason that, and you might wonder, everyone's talking about whether it be the federal election or Trump or all these things going on in the world. You might wonder why, in the midst of all of this, is it important to hold meetings. And we held one in the eastern part of Toronto, St. Paul's, and now we're in the western part of Toronto, St. Paul's, focused and dedicated squarely on tenants' rights and making sure that you know what you need to know to be able to ensure that the health, the safety, and the affordability of our community is advocated for and protected. And the reason why we do this is because I hear from people all the time that they either have, and by the way, just to be clear, there are good landlords, but far too many landlords do not respect the fact that their building and their tenants are not merely a source of income, but that these are people's homes. And there are tenants who I hear from who are struggling to get the support they need from their landlord when it comes to health and safety in their building. There are far too many renters here in Toronto and across our province who get surprised above the guideline rent increases. And my position has always been that it is fundamentally wrong that you as renters have to pay for somebody else's equity. It should be the responsibility of the property owner to maintain their building properly. And we also have a premier who, one of the first things he did, this is before he put on the Captain Canada cape. He removed rent control from all new buildings being built after 2018, which has not only made life more unaffordable for people, but the other challenge with that, as some of you already experience, is that when you don't know how high your rent can go up, it means that you're often feeling vulnerable to even complain, and rightfully so, about a problem in your unit. You don't want to be that squeaky wheel. It takes away your ability to stand up for your own rights. And there are many more concerns that I hear from renters throughout our community and frankly across our city. And while admittedly the city of Toronto doesn't have the majority of power when it comes to landlord-tenant issues, it's covered primarily under legislation at the provincial level, there are some things that the city can do, and that's why a few years ago I led an advisory committee at the City of Toronto. We called the Tenant Issues Committee, and we created RentSafe, which is a part of a division that their mandate is to do audits of buildings and to be there for you when there are concerns about the health and safety of your building and your units. I will also say that there are many people who have said that RentSafe needs to be better. It needs better resources. It needs to forcefully ensure that there are real financial consequences for the worst landlords when they're not willing to make the fixes that you need. In other words, the city should just go in there and do it and then charge them afterward. So there's work that needs to be done to make improvements, and that's work that I'm committed to doing at City Hall under the new mayor and the new administration. John Tory, by the way, removed me as chair, abolished the committee, and we're starting that up soon. Longer story, but I just wanted you to know that the work has to happen, and I'm committed to doing it. That all being said, though, none of the work that I do alone. This is a team approach, and I work with partners both at the city and the not-for-profit sector who are our champions and are our advocates. And I want to introduce a few of them here tonight who are, this is their time in their lives that they're committing to you. And I really am very grateful that they are. Yes. So we have here, from the Federation of Metro Tenants Association, Yaroslava Avia Montenegro, Executive Director. David, and I apologize, David, I'm going to work my way through your surname, and I apologize if I don't get it right. Uday Yasurakaran. Is David here? Oh, well, I hope I got it right. And I understand that Verity is going to be here as well. Oh, there you are. Hey, good to see you. Baumgarten, who's also part of the FMTA. From Rent Safe TO, from the city, we have Alana Ruiz, Divisional Engagement Lead. Thank you. From Acorn, Mayira Weiner? Yes. Where are you? Oh, there you are, right in front. Thank you, Alana. We also have in the booths out there the Oakwood Vaughan Community Organization, the Oakwood Vaughan Tenants Union, and Ontario Renters for Fair Housing. Thank you for being our advocates as well. And before we begin, I also want to just say a few words about each of them. Alana is representing Rent Safe. She's not like the one who runs the whole shop there. So I just want to tell you ahead of time that I agree there's many improvements that need to be made to Rent Safe, but she's on the ground doing the work, and I just want you to know that if you do have some criticisms, throw it this way, she's doing the good work on the ground. Acorn is one of the great advocacy organizations in this country who are challenging every level of government to make life more affordable for tenants and stand up for the rights. And FMTA, I've been to, I can't tell you how many buildings throughout our community where we go from building to building to building to building to building, where there are tenants who are facing an AGI or another challenge, and we help them organize associations, effectively unions, for their community, which lead to both knowing their rights, getting funds to hire paralegals and fight for the rights, and then once they gather and organize, it also lends to a better community, because then there's barbecues and all those wonderful things that socialize and lead to good health, right? So these are great work that they do, and they also run a hotline that we help fund to inform people about what you need to know when you need to know it. So without further ado, I'd like to ask each of our wonderful panelists to just spend a couple minutes and share the work you do and any other information that you think would be helpful. And why don't we begin with FMTA?
Hello. Okay,
there you go.
Perfect. Wonderful. It's all good. Hi, everyone. My name is Yaroslava Montenegro. I am with the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations in Toronto. We have been around since 1974. We are the oldest running tenants federation I believe in Canada, and so we are really proud to be able to be here tonight with you all. And as Josh was saying earlier, we have a variety of different programs in our organization that deal specifically with the needs of tenants. In particular, we have our hotline counselors, many of whom are here tonight. I want to just shout out our staff member, Hannah Nian, who is in the back as well, with David, who and also with Verity here as well. And again, they'll be happy to answer questions for you as well if you have any questions after this presentation. So our hotline staff it basically help tenants whenever they have a crisis or issue with their landlord and have a question about how to be able to deal with it, whether it be an AGI, whether it be maintenance issues, whether it be issues with regards to tenants, any kind of other tenancy law. We can't give legal advice, but we do give summary advice as to what best to do, what is the recourse to be able to take, and next steps for tenants to be able to take. And so that's just one part of the organization. The second part of the organization is embedded in organizing tenants. And so, we know that there are limits in the RTA, and I'm sure we're going to be talking a little bit more about what that looks like. And for those who don't know, the Residential Tenancies Act, i.e. the RTA, is a provincially mandated legislation that governs the issues between landlords and tenants. And so there are limits to the RTA, unfortunately, and there are rights for tenants, but then it's also a matter of collective organizing to make sure that we have tenant power in our communities to be able to push back against bad landlords. And so that's the part of the organization that goes in and tries to be able to organize tenants to be able to have and build tenant unions, build tenant associations in a way that will be sustained in the long term, and also be, you know, a building capacity in our communities for tenant advocacy. So that any of these abuses that come up, you already have that collective power. So that's something that we really, we're very proud to do. And so, again, growing up in this ward, not too far from here, you know, it's really personal to be able to be here tonight and be able to share that experience with you guys. So happy to be able to answer any questions in regards to tenant organizing and/or tenant issues that may come up as well. So thank you.
Thank you. And over to Michael from Acorn.
Hello everybody, so my name is Michael Quadra and I am the co-chair of Acorn of the Weston chapter. Long story short of what Acorn is, we are people. That is about it. Some of us are more informed than others, but the entire point of Acorn is that we are stronger together, we are wiser together, because there are things, because nobody knows everything, but everybody can know something. Alone we can be deceived, alone we can be ignored, but together that is when we can actually get things done. Now the things that we have been trying to do for the last while, amongst other things, the existence of RentSafe. We fought for that for years. Not me personally, I've only been involved in this since January of last year. But we have been trying to tackle on NSF fees. Last year, we were in consultation with the government for a renoviction bylaw, like how Hamilton has it, so that it becomes more difficult for landlords to try to kick people out and then increase the rent of a place that they have just renovated. It starts with the little things. It starts with meetings just like this. It's with monthly meetings when people come together and say, this is the problem that I have in my apartment building. This is the issue that I have with my unit. There is a massive wall this big in my bathroom. I want to know what to do about it. And if not one of us in leadership, somebody knows something. Somebody knows someone that can get something done. The power of community is what we want to channel. The power of the people together, united, informed, is what we want to bring. To bear. For everybody to know their rights, for everybody to know that they are not as powerless as people would want us to think. It is still scary. Don't get me wrong. It still requires bravery to want to stand up to landlords, to be able to say honestly, that the problem that someone may have with their unit, I don't get heat, or that there is no air conditioning. There was more than 50 rats that got caught by the exterminators and there's still more rats. Examples of those lines. Everybody has a little bit of power. But put together, a lot of a little is a lot at the end of the day. I would encourage every single one of you that you already have done the first step. We are here learning together. You don't need to completely know what is going on in order to get involved. I may be up over here saying the words of encouragement right now. I may even say facts later. How about that? But I'm not up here alone. There's a research team behind me that tells me the facts. And likewise, when we go out over there to challenge our landlords to do what needs to be done, you will have a community behind you. You'll have an organization behind you to give you the facts that are needed to get things done. Thank you.
Amen.
Hallelujah. That's beautiful. Thank you, Michael. And Elena, and if you could introduce your colleague as well.
Yes, of course.
From RentSafe.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Elena Ruiz. I am a Divisional Engagement Lead with the Rent Safe TO program.
Sure. My name is Jonathan Paquin. I'm currently a supervisor with the Rent Safe TO program. I've been with the program for just over 5 years, and I did start off as an officer and now in a management position, and I'm here to answer questions on our enforcement procedures and any other questions you may have.
So I'll tell you all a little bit about the Rent Safe TO program. So Rent Safe TO was established in 2017. We are a bylaw enforcement program. So we primarily, we deal with a few different things, but we primarily address property standards issues in apartment buildings that are 3 stories or more and 10 units or more. Those apartment buildings are registered with Rent Safe TO, and they are subject to a building evaluation every other year currently. So if you live in an apartment building, it's likely been evaluated by one of our amazing bylaw officers, and those apartment buildings are given a score. The score is publicly available, so you can look. If you get one of our brochures, a cool QR code that you can use, take you right to the website. You can look at what your apartment building scored. And then those that are scored, they all have a pretty little number that tells you how they were evaluated. Those that score within the bottom 2.5 percentile of buildings that were evaluated will be subject to a building audit the following year. So currently we are in the middle of our building audit season right now. So very busy time. That is when we typically go back to those properties that scored very low. We have a whole team of officers that go. They walk the buildings top to bottom and issue property standards orders for all deficiencies that are identified during that building audit. That property standards order gets sent to the property owner, and they have a certain period of time to rectify the issues that were identified. The second part to the building audit is we also conduct door-to-door door knocking. So we engage with all of the tenants in the building. We invite them to submit service requests to us for issues that may be going on in their units that have gone unattended to, and we kind of do the same process. We'll set up a separate inspection date, and property standards orders will be issued for those deficiencies as well. The third part to the program is related to service requests. So that kind of takes place all year round. So the messaging that we like to give to tenants is make sure that you are submitting any issues that you are experiencing either in your unit or in the common areas of the building. Make sure you are letting the landlord know first, putting it in writing, however their work order process is. Make sure you're following the right process, keeping a copy for yourself. If it is going unaddressed, unanswered, unattended to, or just the issue just keeps happening, contact 311. We will accept the service request, and a bylaw officer will contact you to schedule an inspection. And again, if there's a deficiency found, they will issue property standards orders to be able to rectify the issue and then take any further enforcement action as needed. Did you want to add anything? Yeah, so that's us. We're looking forward to answering some of your questions today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And so I really wanted to just make sure that the bulk of the time was for you to ask anything you want to ask. I just want to acknowledge a couple of people. One is the Verity Center for Better Living. Thank you for being our host this evening. And also members of my team, including Samara and Sarah, along with Sebastian, thank you for your work. Oh, and Jenna, sorry. Thank you for your work to put this all together, and also for what you're about to do, which is to go around with the microphone and identify who would like to ask a question and make sure that they can. So who would like to go first? And we'll make sure we get to everyone, so don't worry. You don't have to pick a number. Hi.
Hello, Josh.
Hello.
I've asked this before, but I'm going to ask it again. In this community, we have a lot of seniors, and at every table I sit at, we talk about aging in place.
Yeah.
How are we going to make that happen here? I have come into this hood. I've been here 6 years, and I don't want to leave it.
I appreciate your question. You may remember when I was first elected, the first thing I did was initiate what we now call the Toronto Senior Strategy. This has been something close to my heart for many years. And I learned more over the years of a concept called NORCs.
Yes.
You know that? It's not work from work, or it's the reason for the acronym. Naturally occurring retirement communities.
Yes.
And the concept is that we have, like, we're an aging society right across the world, and more buildings are just seeing this organic congregation of older adults living there. So rather than having everyone go and find the services they need or end up in a long-term care home, which we saw during the pandemic, many of them are horror shows, and many of them are not places that some are better than others, but they're not places that all of us want to end up in. The question is, how do we make sure that whether you live in a building, a house, or wherever in a community, that you're able to realistically remain in your home to your very last days? So I moved a motion to council to actually explore that. And work is being done right now. I want to get ahead of, for example, all the redevelopment that's happening around us. There's challenges with all that, construction, all that, I get that. But there's opportunities too. For example, can we identify spaces where we negotiate with the developer to have more community spaces, more spaces for socialization, congregation, programming, if we get ahead of it, right? We need everything from health-related services to grocery stores where we don't have enough within rolling or walking proximity to somebody's home. In other words, it needs to be realistic to be able to remain at home. And then, of course, we need the support of other governments to make sure that we have everything from home care to hospice care at home to everything you need to do this well. So the answer simply is, it's complex, it's not going to happen overnight, but it's something that I understand has to be, like, if we're going to design our society to be good and people to be well, we need to do that alongside reforming long-term care so that it's more emotion focused and places that we actually, if we do need to go there, it's a place we want to be.
Thank you for that, Councillor. The other, yeah, I just lost my train of thought. I'm also with UHN. I work under Dr. Kwong with St. Mike's Hospital. He's such a humanist, and I would encourage it to get UHN involved in this.
They are.
Because it is about bringing services to people. So I know it's not going to happen overnight, but Councillor, I lost my community once of 47 years, and I can't tell you how hard that was. I don't have family, and I've made a real family, especially with my church here. And I said St. Mike's and All Angels, I want peace in my life, Councillor.
Well, the two things I'll say to that is, yes, I do work with UHN, the New York Innovation Center, and we work closely together. And you are loved and appreciated, and I always enjoy seeing you, and you're an important part of our community, and you always will be. You're welcome. Who would like to go next?
Sorry. Before I introduce myself, I'm just going back to the last question. I know CARP is working with people staying in their home,
Yeah.
especially in the apartment buildings where it's tri-generational, it's more healthy mentally, et cetera, where you don't have to go to wait for subsidized housing for years and years. Somewhere where you aren't familiar with the doctors or the stores, etc.
Yes.
So, but I represent Ontario Renters for Fair Housing. We just started last year, and our goal is we feel there's power in numbers, and we are gathering as many associations, tenant associations in the province as we can. We've already got about 18, 19, probably about 60,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And we aim to go, we're going to London, Ontario, which is, Toronto's got 47% rental. And Ontario, Kingston and London are the next ones. And what we've been doing, we've been going to all the MPPs and the federal MPs, and actually we've been getting a very good reception. And we're talking to them face to face and explaining what's been going on here since Ford came in and did the rent control 2018 that he abolished. And it's amazing the reaction we're getting. A lot of them don't even know what an AGI is. And so they are actually really receptive. And I'm talking about conservative, liberal, well, of course, NDP, Utila, and people like that have been excellent. But Lee Fairclough now who came in, she's phenomenal. Sylvia, who won against Bonnie Crombie, the Conservative, she's been amazing with us. She's already making appointments for us to Attorney General of Ontario. So we're looking around and we're trying to get as many associations to join us. And so I'm here to see if we can get more numbers in. But it's the only way to educate them. And then the fact that we have so many behind us, they're starting to look very seriously at us and they're calling us back, which is quite interesting. But they don't know they're being lobbied by so many people constantly, and their assistants pick and choose who they want them to see. So the only way to do it, rather than by Zoom or email, is to actually in their face. And it's actually starting to work.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for, thank you for taking the time to advocate and organize. You're absolutely right. Michael spoke very eloquently earlier about how, when we rally together and we come together, we make a bigger difference. Yeah, he spoke beautifully, didn't he? But strategically, you're onto something, whether you fully know it or not. It's one thing when the NDP or the Liberals in opposition will tell Ford, you're wrong or you need to do more, what have you. But when his own members are saying, I don't know if I'm going to get voted in again if we're not listening to people, that will make more of a difference. And so the fact that you're reaching out and you're finding potential allies within his caucus, that is incredible. I hope that those who will privately tell you that they're on your side will say that publicly as well, because that will also make a difference. And successive governments like Kathleen Wynne at the end of her term organized a review of AGIs, but then she lost. Nothing happened. The Ford government, I understand, I hear, is also looking at AGIs, but whenever he looks at something, it doesn't often get better. So we're waiting to see what comes of this. But the more advocacy that you can be part of, and working with FMTA and ACORN and other groups, that makes a difference. So if any of you are affiliated with any groups and want to sign up and get involved, that's a great way to do it. Sarah?
Sorry, can you just explain what AGIs are? Just we have some questions.
Can I take this one?
You go for it. Let's explain what acronyms are for those who don't know. Yes.
Yeah, so AGI, I'm sorry. Yes. Sorry, there we go. So yes, AGI, sorry, I jump in on this stuff. The entire reason of my existence in ACORN is because of AGIs. So AGIs stand for above guideline increases. Long story short, they are how a landlord tries to get around rent controls and tries to justify bumping up the rents. And they can apply for, say for example, if they are trying to do something major, say, let's say let's just say like they want to put like dimming lights in the common areas. That would cost a certain amount of money to get the light bulbs, all the electrical work, blah, 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 to make that all work. The justification for AGIs is that these things are good for the tenants and they cost so much money, therefore the tenants must pay for it. And there's a whole load of things they can try to put on an AGI, above guideline increases, to justify we need to increase your rent by this much percentage every single month so that we can pay for this big project that we did. Now, I have challenged AGIs ever since I became aware of them, which I became aware of them because I got one and got very, very angry when I got one that effectively said that there were some repairs on the roof, that we tried making the building more energy efficient, and we did some work on the elevators. First off, the elevators still keep on breaking my apartment building, so I have no idea what the heck they did, not that great of a job. And then the energy efficiency stuff for lighting, well, it's in their best interest to do that anyway. They're paying less electricity, why do I need to pay for that? And then for stuff on the roof, if there's no roof, people can't live there. And then they can't pay rent. That's in their interest to keep the roof up and in good condition. So why do any of us need to pay for them? So that's what an AGI effectively is. It's a way to try to get even more rent out of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to add, so above the guideline means that there's a percentage guideline each year for rent increases, and this, as you say, takes it above and beyond what should be allowable for, questionable reasons. Who would like to go next? Sarah?
No.
Oh, you're already
We
there.
have
Can everybody? Okay. So
Yeah, you're on. You're on.
to AGIs. We've had major work on our garage for 4 years, would you say? About 4 years. I did a Freedom of Information Act trying to figure out who said that work had to be done. I've gotten no response. Well, the response I have is that there is no information from the government. I found that a very frustrating procedure. So I'd like to know how our building was mandated to have this work done, because it was going to be like a Florida situation. We're concerned about an AGI. They've also done light work. I'm also aware that apartment buildings are supposed to have major repair budgets, and much of this stuff should come under it. So who do I talk to?
Is it Yaroslava? Would you like to? Thank you.
So AGIs are one of the #1 things that we deal with here at FMT. Also with Acorn, I'm sure gets the same thing. And AGIs are really something that are plaguing across the city. I myself had to deal with one just very recently, also for a roof repair. So the information that you can, #1, you can reach out to either the colleagues here at the table, myself at FMTA. We have a hotline service that you can call to be able to get more information about how to be able to deal with your AGI. If you're looking to organize, and if you already have an organizing tenants association in your building, reach out to our organizer line. And I'm just going to pull up the number really quickly because that is where we actually go to the building, be able to have a meeting with tenants, examine, and you be able to give us all the documentation that you have to be able.
We don't have the documentation yet. We presume that it's going to be forthcoming because they have to finish the project.
But you should have
6 months.
But you should have received the AGI. You should have received the information by law that they're supposed to inform you of that AGI and all of the information that you need to be able to get for that for the AGI, because it would have had to be passed on to the landlord and tenant board in order for it to be a thing. So for example.
So maybe I'm worried about nothing?
So no. So for example, in the case of the AGI that I just literally went through,
Right.
they have to give you disclosure about all of the things that they have done, because it's something to be able to claim that they want an AGI. So they have to give you evidence. They have to give you the evidence. They have to be able to give you all of the backing of what they've done, the receipts for them as well. And they're supposed to be able to notify the landlord and tenant board in order to be able to have that be authorized as an above guideline increase. They can't just do it on their own. So for example, we have a 2.5% regular increase in rent. It cannot go above 2.5. Anything above 2.5, they have to make into an AGI. But you, as a tenant, have the right to contest the AGI at the LTV hearing.
Right.
So if you haven't gotten that yet, you need to contact us, and also probably and we can forward your issues to maybe a paralegal, or for example, one of the clinics one of the legal clinics in Toronto that deals with issues of that sort. So yeah, feel free that we can talk after.
And just to make it easier for you about the phone number, if you look at the back, we've got our tenant guide that we put together to kind of make it all easy for you. And you'll see just on the front page, or the second page rather, we'll have the FMTA tenant hotline, but also some of the legal services for paralegal support that you might want to contact as well. Because you'll have kind of some like context-specific questions about what you're facing. May I ask you, do you have an association in your building?
Yes, we
Okay,
do.
good. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
The
landlord isn't happy about it.
The number,
Good, well, yeah.
Sorry, the number for the outreach line is 416-413-9442. That's again, 416-413-9442. Sorry.
Can I jump on that a little bit? Sorry, just to jump on a little bit on your specific situation. I'm not going to go too much into it because, like has been said, to talk about your situation specifically in more detail, that's a more in detail conversation for after this. But to jump on something that was said, that they have to provide you documents. When you get an AGI, they should give you all the information up front. Every single receipt, every single order, every single justification and page that they are giving to the LTB, they have, the landlord-tenant board, they give to you. Because the entire point of it is that you can look at the receipts and challenge line items. And so you're going through hundreds of pages and trying to cross off as many things as possible. So at the very least, if you can't get rid of the AGI outright, you can get it lowered.
It's always worth it.
Yeah.
So in the RTO?
RTA, so the
RTA?
Residential Tenancies Act.
You know, reasonable upkeep of building structures, like there's, so, like, don't they fall short in reasonable upkeep and repair? Because it's been so extensive?
This is part of when I was speaking earlier about the fact that the Residential Tenancies Act is important to have, because then we know the limits of what our rights are, but it does not go far enough. This is where knowing the RTA is really important, but also knowing that it's also important to organize on the ground, to be able to coordinate a response. Because unfortunately, the landlord-tenant board does tend to side with the landlord. And there's a saying at FMTA, as well as the York Southwestern Tenant Union, that says there's the reason why the LTB has landlord first is for a reason. And so that's just something to keep in mind. So it's important to go through the legal steps, but at the end of the day, organizing is what's going to get you forward in your tenant advocacy.
Hi there. Thank you. I think we've covered a couple of my questions anyway, but we have an AGI now. We haven't received any of the documentation. I have phoned on several occasions and asked them. So now we can call you and get that information. Just one other thing I wanted to ask about with regard to the lighting situation. Does the provincial government give any grants for, improving green lighting and making it more effective to the landlords? Is there a grant that the government, the progressive government gives, to enable them to put these lightings in to make it? Well, it's not that better, because the corridors are so dark now that you can stumble around on them, and the lighting in the apartment is just glaring. But I just wondered if they receive any grants, and why should we be paying for the lighting then as part of the AGI?
So does anyone here know if there's a provincial government grant for that? I'm not aware.
There isn't necessarily. It depends on what framework you're using. So for example, if you have, for green energy, if you have solar panels, for example, they could get a rebate for that. but that it depends on how they frame it, right? So if there is green energy being implemented in your building, they might get a grant for that. Unfortunately, one of the things that we're also seeing at the FMTA is that sometimes these renovations that come, even with increased lighting, still put onto the tenant, even though there are programs and things involved. So it would be worth looking into in terms of researching.
Yes,
whether
I
or not.
just thought you might have that information. And the other thing is, part of this new AGI, I understand, is for new boilers. Now, in 2016, we had an AGI for new boilers, and we had to, it was allowed. So I'm just wondering, how many boilers can we continue to pay for depreciation over other years? And I also understood, or maybe I'm just imagining it, that if and when an asset is fully depreciated, that the tenants should be getting a rebate on their rent. And I've never known if that is true or if it isn't true. Thank you.
I just want to kind of answer that bit with my gut. Every single time that they do a renovation, anytime that they will do work on the elevator, anytime that they are able to do work on the roof, anytime that they are able to do new boilers, those are considered new assets, and then that fights depreciation. So I suspect, and this is just gut feeling, I don't know if this is fact, but this is gut feeling, that all of these things that they do is to try to fight depreciation, so that if there is stuff like that in the books, that is voided. Also, something that was said earlier, there was something that was said earlier that I wanted to jump on. I've lost my train of thought though.
Let me know if it pops back into your mind.
Oh, sorry. AGIs do expire, so there is an expiry to when you get your AGIs. So for example, if you have multiple in a row, say for example 2018 to 2022,
yes,
for example, right? So after the period in which after the period in which the AGI is done, you are actually, I believe, it depends on how long the specific what's it called, the specific issue that they had dealt with. For example, a roof, for example, depending on the project, has at least a minimum of 10 years, right? After the AGI is done, you are eligible for a rebate. So again, so if there's anyone who has existing AGIs, please make sure that you keep all of that documentation, because you can then go to the LTV and be able to see when your AGI expires, to be able to get a rebate, and there's a whole process for that.
Now I remember the thing.
Information, thank you.
We've been
fighting
that with High Park, Tenant Association,
Yep.
they had too, but most of the landlords will not willingly give that.
Yeah, you have to.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you have to.
I just want to add just something to be very clear about the whole process. Don't listen to your landlord. Look at the legislation. They will put things on official letterhead. They will try to compel you, persuade you. They're not watching your back. So you want to understand what your actual rights are under the legislation. That's why we help fund the FMTA hotline. This is why we want to make sure that you have that information. That's why we want you to be able to access legal services. And if you have a tenants association, that's why we also have a fund at the city, even though it's not actually our responsibility, to ensure that you can access funds to hire a paralegal in many circumstances. As was said before, it's always worth the fight, because even if you don't get rid of the whole thing, you can bring it down, but they need to make that argument to the board. And if you're there with your paralegal, you can make an argument too. So, just once again, and you're right, keep documentation on everything.
Also, I remember you had a question about, are there energy grants or green energy grants for lights and what have you. I am not so sure about that. However, unless I am mistaken, there is talk about trying to make such energy efficiency measures mandatory across all apartment buildings. We were having a meeting at Acorn about starting another campaign about this environmental policy in which we want to save the environment, don't get me wrong, but we don't want the landlords to be able to use this mandate to then be able to do the green and energy efficient projects on apartment buildings and then through AGIs force all of us to pay for it, especially considering they are probably going to be getting other benefits for it. If they're saving on energy, they're spending less money on energy every month. It's in their they are probably going to be saving money that way, and then they're probably going to be able to get some sort of government incentive to do this mandate, I suspect. So we're trying to make sure at Acorn that we're going to be trying to do this campaign that yes, we want to save the environment, absolutely, but it cannot come out of the cost of tenants in order to make that a reality.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's gonna be incredibly stupid, but I figured myself give it a go.
Ask whatever you have.
Yeah, so, I mean, one thing I gotta ask is, like, I already did this with the political leaders when they showed up at St. Michael's Church, which she was there, by the way. Okay? And I'll probably ask again, are we doing anything to stop, like, rent increases from being a thing? Like, I know this is, like, a thing that happened in 2018 over here, but this is, like, getting ridiculous, and I'm, like, on ODSP over here, and they barely pay me enough to get by into this. You kind of answered that, but I'm not entirely sure.
I'll begin, and then I'll invite anyone else who'd like to opine on that. I mean, it depends what you mean by we, right? There are many of us, I move motions and try to put attention on these issues. Acorn and FMTA and other organizations do as well. We heard from the Ontario Coalition for Fair...
Ontario Renters for Fair Housing.
Ontario Renters. I just wanted to plug you again, of course. There are people who are doing that. What frustrates me to no end is that every election, all we're talking about is either a buck of beer or something else, right? And so we do need to, at every provincial election, organize more effectively, I would submit, on making sure that we turn everyone's attention to these kind of real issues that affect our lives. And I would also add, just saying that we don't like something is never as good as advocating for what we want. So for example, I moved a motion to take a position that rather than have AGIs, which again I say are fundamentally unethical because you're paying for somebody else's equity, there should be like a 10% reserve fund, for example, like condo boards do, where if you own a property, the price of doing business is paying for your property's upkeep, and you should put a reserve aside to make sure that that's maintained. Rather than using AGIs, as Michael said, as a fast way around the limits of increasing rents each year. So, but again, the fact that you're here and the fact that we are talking about these issues is part of the organizing as well. Did you want to add anything?
I think I said this before at the last Tenant Townhall that we had a few weeks ago, but the issue that. The thing that is the most important is to be able to build capacity in our communities, to build tenant power. It is the only way that that landlords are going to listen to us, that the political class are going to listen to us. I'm grateful to Josh for having us tonight, and being able to have this. Not every politician does that, but it's also that we as tenants also have to build that power. And so if we have that, then we're going to be able to build that capacity necessary to be able to say, hey, we need to have a seat at the table and have a fair have a fair deal when it comes to the issues of tenants. Because the fact of the matter is, tenants are the ones that have to, pay the price of having to have bad landlords. And there's very little recourse we can do. We can try and navigate as much as we can within the courts, and that's what we're trying to do on a daily basis, but we also need to organize on the ground.
Yes.
Answer the question, what do we, Pardon?
No, go ahead,
Oh,
Michael.
sorry. I was like, is the mic not working or something? To try to answer the question of what do we do, we as Acorn. A thing that we did last year, because unfortunately there's so many different things that go into how do we try to make life more affordable? How do we try to make sure that we can make rent, how we can actually live and feed ourselves, even those of us that are working, that are not working, whatever our situation is. There's so many things that go into that. For instance, and unfortunately the only thing I can say, we try to take things one step at a time, one chunk at a time. Last year with Acorn, we were in consultation with the government about passing a renoviction bylaw, renovictions being the process in which, say, I'm living somewhere, they want to renovate the place, and in that time when they're renovating, they boot me out, and when they finish the renovations, they increase the rent, let somebody move into the place where I was just living in. We were in consultation with the government to try to make that sort of stuff illegal, or at the very bare minimum, make that a lot harder to pull off. And one of the small victories that we can celebrate is the fact that that did get passed. And that it is harder for landlords to try to renovate a place and then boot that person out and then get somebody else to live in there for a higher price. We have it now that if there's renovations that are really necessary, that, and I'm saying in quotations because sometimes they'll say they're like, oh, we really need to do these renovations. And if it really needs to be done, then it should be the right of the tenants to be able to come back to where they lived at the same rent, paying the same rent that they did before the renovations. In Hamilton, and we're copying a similar framework from Hamilton, when they did that in Hamilton, suddenly there weren't so many urgent needs for renovations. How about that? Suddenly they didn't feel the need to renovate as much anymore when they were on the hook for trying to find a place for the tenant to live in while the renovations were happening. And when the renovation is done, that the tenant can go, the tenant has the first right to go back there, paying the same rent as before. Does it completely solve the problem? No. It fixes a part of it. It helped a whole bunch of people that were under threat of that. I understand the frustration. Trust me, I do.
Thank you, Michael. And by the way, just to be clear, the government that he's referring to is not the government. It was the city of Toronto doing their job for them. You're to see.
Yes, Josh, I'm really happy to see that you are again working with tenants in a higher, in a more broad way, because we worked together many times, and I really appreciated working with you.
Me too.
I should say that you are one of the city councillors that really went out there for tenants and challenged landlords like Achilles. You called them and you said, hey, what you're doing? Tenants are complaining. I think it's very good. In that spirit, I'd like to tell you that I'd like to see the city council really go against this, what is happening in the city now, that is perfectly good buildings are being destroyed, rent-controlled buildings are being destroyed to get towers in their places, and these towers are not rent-controlled and are making a horrible city for us. So I really I lived in the Eglinton area there, Eglinton and Mount Pleasant. It was like this, and now I am at Eglinton and Dufferin, and it is like this too. They are destroying good buildings to build those towers. So I really appreciate to see you and other city councillors go against that movement. Do not take down controlled rent to build towers that are not rent controlled. You know. Thank you.
For a moment. So what you're referring to, we've been referring to as demevictions. And I explained to my colleagues, I actually spoke to this at a recent committee meeting at City Hall, that we have this debate in our society that we often refer to as NIMBYs versus YIMBYs. You know those acronyms? You know those terms? Not in my backyard and yes in my backyard. Yes in my backyard means we have a housing crisis, build, because we need more housing units. And NIMBY is no change at all. And so these polarized extremes, sadly, like most debates we have in society today. But then there are people that get lost in the middle. It's not about should we have more housing or not. As you said, it's about protecting the affordable housing stock that we have today. And so I agree with you that not only I'd like to see the legislation improved so that the city does have the tools to do that more, but we also need to be very, very vigilant about protecting Section 111 of the City of Toronto Act. What that does is that when there is a redevelopment of any building, that it ensures, and again, every legislation, every power the city has its roots at the province in the Canadian system. So we have this piece of legislation that allows the city that when there's a redevelopment, if you live in a building of 6 units or more that's being redeveloped, we can actually negotiate a deal where everything from moving costs to the gap between, let's say you've got to live somewhere for a couple of years while they do the redevelopment, the gap in rent is covered by the developer, and you have a right of return to the new building at roughly the same rent you paid before. Those are rights under legislation that are being threatened by the Ford government. And we need to be vigilant to protect that chapter of the legislation. So I completely agree with you, and I've personally been working with no dem evictions on all of this. Thank you. Who's next? Yeah.
I represent 440 Winona, and we have 2 issues going on. We just recently have an AGI back in November, and when we asked about the the rail salvage from our balcony, we did not receive it. And so when we did go to the rental tribunal, they just totally dismissed us, and so we got the bill. So it should have been reduced from the total cost of the amount that they were charging us, and that did not happen. So, I guess the question I'm asking is that even though we go to the boards, they're more in favor of the landlord, and we're out thousands of dollars because they took that wrought iron and they probably got salvage for it, and we did not receive that as tenants. So that's question number 1.
Yeah. First of all, I'm sorry that you and your neighbors have gone through that. And you're absolutely right that landlords will often have the upper hand at the tribunal. It's essentially designed that way. That being said, though, it's always worth fighting, but you're right, tenants aren't always successful. Yaroslava, did you want to add on to that?
Yes, I was basically reiterating the same thing I was saying before, which is, unfortunately, at the LTV, and my building also experienced this just recently, where we also had an above guideline increase, and it was so likely to go through, they didn't even give us a public hearing, they just gave us a written hearing. And so, which gave us almost no time to be able to get all the evidence together for the landlord and tenant board. So I understand, and it is really, really unfortunate, but the answer, again, because we don't have those rights right now in the legislation, that does not mean that our fight ends there. We have to keep organizing. If you have do you have a tenants association in your building?
I'm the chair.
Amazing, okay. Then what we need to, maybe one of the things that we need to take back into our different organizations is to build a campaign based on AGIs, because we're seeing it everywhere. It is affecting every tenant in the city. And so maybe that's something I think that we would need to be able to, so that we can build a broader capacity. I'm also part of a broad coalition called Fair Rent Ontario. who also is arguing for the end of AGIs. And so so I think we need to be able to build a broad-based campaign against AGIs at the provincial level. And it's also important to realize where these powers lie, right? This is at the provincial level versus the municipal level that is now dealing with issues of rent eviction and bylaws that are trying to be able to help tenants. But this is definitely one of those loopholes that we can build towards a broader campaign.
Sorry, did you want to have a follow-up?
No, there's another question that 440 is facing. Some of my tenants under human rights accommodation, housing accommodation for the AC is being charged $400 by our landlord. I know they can't do that, but
have you spoken with a paralegal about this? Have you spoken to a legal clinic?
we have done that. Doctor's notes have been provided, but the landlord, because have continue to send my tenants these notices. $400 for the month of, I guess, every year, May, June, and July, August.
And may I ask you, and we can speak offline if you feel more comfortable,
Sure.
but I'd want to understand what legal advice you received and what options you were provided.
They said that they can't do that because basically under medical accommodation under the housing, right? Housing accommodation, the landlord has to accept that.
Yeah.
And so the most vocal tenants that have spoke up for themselves, they don't get these notices. And the ones that are quiet, they continue to get these notices. So they're very selective with who gets these notices and who don't.
Well, I'd like to speak with you more about this.
Sure.
And anything that I can do to provide you with any more support, any more advice, and anything I can even do to confront the landlord in a helpful way, I'm happy to.
I think probably the tenants may have the only option but to take it to the Human Rights Tribunal, which is a violation under the Human Rights Code.
Absolutely, that's there for them, yeah. And by the way, thank you for your leadership in your building too.
Just a comment before we move on from your statement. I can say from personal experience, it's hard being the head of a tenants association, and you're doing a marvelous job just coming over here to advocate for those under your association, to bring these issues over here and to try to advocate for them as best you can. Keep up the good work.
And it's me, myself, and I. And when you start to recognize the dynamics of the population or your tenants, they just, language is a barrier, right? English is your second language. You're coming from war-torn countries, Ethiopia, and so they're scared with authority.
Yes.
One of my tenants was charged $300 for plunging the toilet. No. And because they don't know the English language, they hate it. I have the receipts.
And that is why, as I said earlier, it's not the landlord that we should be listening to, it's legislation, but you're absolutely correct that not everybody, this is why we hold these meetings, like not everybody knows what the rights are, and you're right, there are people who come from places where they understand that they're just supposed to go along with whatever they believe is the instruction. And that's why we need to get to those people and let them know that they're not alone, and let them know that they've got support. And that's why I'd love to speak with you a little more later, because if we can help you and your tenants or your neighbors understand what their rights are and challenge your landlord, I'm happy to do that. I'll give you like an example of something far less maybe awful in a way as what you just described, but nonetheless it had a real impact on the building. And this happens to renters right across our city every shoulder season of every year, where the city's had a bylaw for many, many years that limits how cold you're allowed to have your building. So it says you've got to keep the heat on for a few months. But as you know, the weather outside doesn't always correlate to how hot it is inside. And landlords will often just rest on that bylaw to allow their tenants to boil in their homes and not make sure that they have access to whether it be air conditioning, turn off the heat sometimes. And there are also, I think, inane restrictions on even how wide we can open windows, which are not restrictions on condo owners, only tenants. So there's changes that need to be made, but we've got all those rules, all those laws. There should be a minimum temperature bylaw. There are things that I'm advocating for, along with Acorn. But until we get there, sometimes we got to be creative about how we advocate. And I literally showed up at that building with a city TV camera, put it in the face of the owner, and man, did they move. They told me the day before that they couldn't do anything, and the next day they miraculously figured it out. So I'm happy to sit down with you, and if there's any creative way that we can advocate together, I'm happy to at least brainstorm with you and work with you.
And if there's anything that any one of us can do, I'm sure we will try. Just when you were saying that you had tenants that came from war-torn, I feel that one of the tenants in my association, they are counting the months, maybe years that they have left until they have to go out on the street. And the only reason they do not speak up, Spanish is their main language. They came here from South America. And when I had to talk to them, I'm not fluent in Spanish despite my last name being Latino. So I understand when you say that you have tenants that come from very different backgrounds and that there are these awful, awful realities that we have to sit with those that we advocate for, that sometimes that they'll go, well, I've got at this rate maybe 2 years until I'm homeless. And it is awful to then have to sit across from them and you want to try to say something hopeful, something optimistic, and struggling to come up with anything. I feel you.
Thank you, Michael.
I just want to be mindful of time. We have about 20 minutes left for the question session, so I see you. I'm going to try to get to everybody.
AGI in my building. I've got a number of tenants that I've managed to organize. This is not so much a question as much as information for the rest of you fighting the AGIs, particularly with roofs, which has become a very popular theme for the AGIs recently. I find legal counsel, so the information I'm giving I've paid for, so hopefully you benefit from it. Those of you who have an AGI, the first thing I'll tell you is get a lawyer ASAP, because they will give you virtually no time when they give you anything in writing, and sometimes they don't even do that. They will try to not give you the documentation, which has happened in my building, unless you sort of push, and I had paralegal pushing, where others did not. One thing you may not know, which I discovered through my legal fees, is that they are required to give you not only a copy of the justifying documentation when asked in electronic format, they must also give you access to the internet portal of the Landlord Tribunal, which is one of the things that the lawyer of North Edge did not do in my case, which got noted but didn't really count much. I don't know if it will count much in the merits hearing which we have scheduled. These are things for you to bear in mind. My lawyer had told me that when it comes to roofs, we have a different situation. They may or may not get the valid permits that are required, because they will often just roll the dice and see if they have to pay the fine or not, but it has no bearing upon the Landlord Tribunal hearing, which I find rather interesting, and I don't know if the city government wants to sort of start looking into that. But apparently, according to my lawyer, a lot of landlords are not getting the proper tenant. I live in a 26-story building, and actually Mr. Matlow had sent someone to look at the roof of our building, and they had said, and thank you for that, they had said there is no indication of any work that required a permit. That, and I quote, now, 27-story building, I'm looking for a lawyer to tell me in writing that they have to have a permit to do that, But even if they do, it apparently has no relevance within the landlord-tenant hearing itself, as it's considered to be a separate matter. So all you can do is really, they can be fined after the fact, but they can still ask for the cost because they've done the cost, whether it was done properly or not. These are things you may all want to be aware of if you're getting a roof construction above guideline increase, because they may or may not have gotten the permits, especially if your building is more than 3 stories high. I did that.
Thank you very much for sharing what you've learned.
Hi, Councillor Matlow. Thanks for having the session tonight. Thanks to the panel for your time being here. Over the years that I've lived in the neighborhood, I've taken 2 different landlords to the LTB and they sided with me both times. But in both cases, I've run into an issue where the landlord has proposed a payment plan that was honestly absurd. The other guy just changed his email address, blocked my phone number, and I can't get a hold of him. I don't have, the only address that I have for both of them was the address that I was renting when I lived there. So my question is, what do we do? I mean, obviously the next step is I need to go to small claims court, but what do you do when landlords just decide that, yeah, okay, the LTD sides with the tenant, but they can just ignore it and move on with their lives like nothing's happened? What recourse do tenants have for that?
Yaroslava, can you? Thank you.
So they have the legal responsibility to be able to fulfill their duties according to the LTV. So if they're, well, number one, I would definitely recommend talking to a paralegal or legal professional, specifically in regards to your case. But also, and this is also with regards to shady landlords who don't disclose who they are, who don't disclose like the name of the business. Sometimes they're numbered corporations. I implore folks to be able to look into the Toronto archives to be able to see where the landlord, if you're in that situation, go to the Toronto archives and search for your address, and then that registry will come up. So making sure that I believe it's the Toronto archives that are recent, because there's 2 different ones. So you have to go in person to do like through their machines to be able to look up the address of the landlord, this is a specific landlord, or who owns the building that you are residing in. But yes, I would recommend talking to legal counsel because they cannot ignore mandates from the LTV.
Thank you very much. Sarah?
More. So I'm going to say, massive fan of FMTA, and they know that. You're going to see just out, hail up, for sure. Fill up also, snaps, Joita. Anyhow, and crew. Massive Acorn fan, and also York South Weston Union. The one thing that some of us at OTVU have a disagreement of a statement, and the statement's a generalist, that landlord comes before tenant for a reason. Our position that is slightly different is it is a broken system at this time. So, and the current way, post-lockdown, after pandemic, function of the LTB board, it is a broken system at this time, unless you want to say it is working for very specific people. What I'm wanting to know is if something can be done on some of the large issues that people run up against in the current rendition of the system. Many people in this neighborhood, myself included, we no longer have access to file something for our landlords because they will not give us an address, they will not give us a telephone number, and they do not give us a contact. Some will say, oh, but you have an address. The people in my building who've gone to the address find it's a convenience store, and the people at the convenience store are like, what? We don't know, we don't know. Oh wait, rent? Oh yes, you know. But other filings that go to their location, they just return to sender mail. And at landlord and tenant, when I did successfully find their lawyer and file it to their lawyer, the member said, well, how did you figure out a way through that loophole? As if they were like, oh, that's really ingenuitive of you, as if the problem isn't that these issues are taking place and we are getting access to navigate them. So, is there, real question, something that we have the capacity to do at a city level where that portion of a loophole is closed? Like, you have people that you're renting to in the city, and they should be able to have some means of your contact info. So if they're needing to file something because you are causing a problem in their tenancy, they should be having the ability to address the issue.
Thank you for raising that specific issue. Perhaps, Lana, do you know?
I don't know for sure, I'll be honest. I know that in my experience, what we have done in the past at some of our building audits as well, just because we do run into a lot of tenants that are kind of, facing issues of evictions and things like that, and issues with the landlord-tenant board. A lot of times I also refer tenants to the Housing Secretariat Division with the City of Toronto. I do find that they are a little bit, much more responsive than the landlord-tenant board. You're more likely to probably get a response because it is a municipal division, similar to like municipal licensing and standards, Toronto Water, etc. So that would be my recommendation, just to get a response, and they're able to kind of support tenants and give you more information about your rights and kind of walking you through the process, be able to provide you with more resources. Kind of about the landlord-tenant board and things like that.
Just a quick thing to add, if you don't mind. There is a requirement for landlords to post on their notification board an emergency contact, which would include whoever you're supposed to call, property manager, superintendent, or the owner, and including their phone number. So if you don't find that on your notification board, and this only applies to apartment buildings that have 3 stories or more and 10 units or more, so if it's not posted on there, or the number posted on there does not work, and you've tried reaching out to the landlord, you're not getting any answer, please call 311, notify them of your complaint, and an officer will investigate and take appropriate action.
I need to clarify something. We have the board, we have the address, we have the telephone number. Telephone number goes into a voicemail box. We'll get back to you, we'll get back to you. And in terms of the address, 5 people from my building have gone to the address. It is a convenience store. Problem is, if you now want to file something, the convenience store just sends the mail back. So
yeah,
we have an address.
I get what you're saying, and if I can just convey,
I think I misunderstood.
It's got to be like, if they're not putting accurate, helpful information to actually contact them, what can they do, and what's the consequence?
Contact 311.
Okay.
we will do our best to kind of get in contact, and we have our own systems and our own things to kind of track people down. And issue property standards orders and other documents when it comes to your communication with your landlord.
Of the, this is going to pretty much be every single question that might come up. But what do? We fight within and outside of the current restraints. We fight within the system of what we can. And when we encounter bad actors, when we encounter rulings that go against common sense, against human rights, appeal where we can. And then whilst in the process of doing that, we pay attention to our councillors. We work together as neighbors when we can. We go to the meetings at City Hall. We vote. We participate in government to try to change the law. We have to fight within and without. We have to try to change the laws as we are trying to fight, with little exaggeration, for our ability to survive.
Thank you, Michael. And I want to make sure that we fit in kind of a fire round here of as many questions as possible before the...
I'll be uber quick.
Yeah.
My concern is, you said earlier you don't do buildings under 10 units. And Josh, you said 6 units. Now, what happens to all these buildings around here where there's 4 units, or 3, or 2? Or we live in a city now that allows you to do 3 and 4 units. Who's going to protect those people? And what protection do they have that everybody here who's in a multiple unit having all their neighbors with them as well, that these people in these small buildings have nothing, nobody protecting them. So who's going to stand up for them?
Yeah, great question. Do you want to begin?
Yeah, so in order for a building to be registered with rent-safe TO, they have to meet that requirement of the 10 units and 3 stories or more. However, the property standards bylaw actually applies to all properties in the city of Toronto. So if there are residents that are living in smaller buildings, where it doesn't necessarily meet the criteria for rent safe, you can actually still contact 311 if you're not getting a response from your landlord.
Single basement apartment.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and they follow the same bylaw. It's a similar process. Let your landlord know if there's no response, no answering, anything like that. Contact 311, and it just goes to another unit. They deal more so with residential and commercial properties, but it'll take the same similar action.
And just to clarify, when I said 6, I was referring to Section 111 of the City of Toronto Act, which is a different issue. And I completely agree that should be expanded. I think that's an arbitrary limitation.
Just to quickly add, there is also the MTH licensing that is now being enacted in the City of Toronto, which is for rooming houses that house up to 4 apartments, I believe, within a specific household. So there are licensing standards within the multi-tenant housing bylaw that was enacted last year at the end of March. So those like the landlord contact information, fire code, safety, all of that needs to be put in a public place within that residence so that everyone can see. And there are strict regulations in terms of the licensing of that. So if you're curious about that, we also deal with multi-tenant housing, and we can talk after the Q&A.
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
Hello, Josh. How are you?
Hi, good to see you.
Well, we've seen each other for many years.
Yes, indeed.
One of the first meetings was in this heating air conditioning business.
Yeah.
When because you were there, we had the CBC and we got full TV coverage. I became famous overnight.
Yeah, that's right.
But I have basically I think there are 3 questions. Number 1, who was the actual mayor of Toronto? Do we have a mayor or do we have a premier who's the mayor?
I get what you mean. Yeah. I get what you mean. So let me chat. We also have Doug Ford. Listen, I could give a TED talk on this, and I've got like 3 minutes, but I'll make this nice and tight. Unlike the rest of the world, cities don't exist in our constitution here in Canada. So we have a system where our provincial governments can literally do whatever they want with cities. If Ford wanted to rename Toronto Ford Nation, he legally could. He can make Toronto a suburb or a borough of Mississauga. He can do whatever he wants. And unfortunately, he keeps intervening and disrupting and usurping local authority and local autonomy. And that's why I'm advocating for a city charter. I want Toronto, thank you. I want Toronto and other big cities. 80% of Canadians live in urban areas today. We're very different than 1867 when the Constitution was produced. Toronto and other big cities should have the ability to do everything from have authority over our revenue, our governance, including our elections, and the ability to plan for communities. Communities that are planned with parks and social services and infrastructure and school capacity, and yes, affordability. And meanwhile, we need to do everything we can with every power that we are bestowed with to fight for those values in between. And then hopefully in the next election, we're not talking about Buck-a-Beer and we're not talking about Trump, but we're talking about Ontario, and we're talking about Toronto, and we're talking about supporting the people who live here and not allowing our political leaders to distract us with things that aren't really the most important things that affect our lives every day. I'll kind of segue into concluding the meeting by saying, I really appreciate, first of all, can we just hear it for all of our panelists who are here? I really, I appreciate you being here to support the community. I appreciate you taking time out of your lives to do so. And most importantly, I appreciate the work you do. And everything we do, we work as a team. And I'm really grateful for everything you do, along with everyone who's leading and organizing other organizations and efforts to advocate for our communities. And, the last time we held a Tenant Townhall, I remember my team came up to me and she said that she had spoken with a tenant who had told her that along with all the information that they received and understanding who to call and what to do, it was really important for her to know that she's not alone. And I just want to kind of reiterate that you're not alone. We are a community. We have each other's backs. And yes, we don't have all the power in the world and the laws weren't written for all of us. But that's why, as my dad always told me when I was a kid, get involved in the system and try to change it from within. And as my mom always told me, leave a place better than you found it. And that's what we're trying to do together, and I'm really grateful to each of you. Thank you very much. By the way, can we hear it again from my amazing staff who really put this together?